Alright, welcome back to the action shed. This week, if you can sort of see over my shoulder there, we're going to be tackling a diff build and ARB air locker install. So, we'll chat more after the intro, eh?
We're going to put some Daihatsu back in the Daihatsu.
Alright, as I said before the intro there, we're going to be building a FORD 9-inch diff center with a ARB air locker. So this is for me mates. I think it's a 71 4 drive F100. He unfortunately made the mistake of trying to either do burnouts in reverse or recover someone in reverse, which blew his entire third member apart. So he supplied me with this third member here. But when I pulled it apart, as you can see, that housing is gone. So this bearing here is supposed to sit in there, and the end of the housing's cracked off. So he's had to buy a new housing. That's it there, the third member. Come from Sydney Competition Warehouse. Got it really quick, so that's good. I just give it a lick of paint. They couldn't actually supply it painted because of COVID. So he's given me this center. The ratio's wrong. It's 411. His truck is 3.9 from memory. So he's organised ratios and a bearing kit. Unfortunately, that bearing kit was to suit this housing. The big problem with this housing is there's two different diameter for the carrier bearings. Originally, the FORD 9-inch was built as a 28 spline diff. Then they went to a transitional period where they went to 31 spline. Once they worked out 28 was pretty weak. So they kept the OD, the bearing, which I think from memory is 2.75 inch, and changed the ID to suit 31 spline. That's what this housing is. So it's technically a 28 spline housing. Nobody does replacement housings for these. All the housings you're going to get, like that one over there, are either for 31, 35, 40 spline, or even bigger. I've even heard of 50 spline 9 inches. Then they start going to 10-inch crown wheels, doing really dumb stuff. So he's had to buy a new third member and then replace the bearings out of that kit, which luckily are actually Hilux rear axle bearings, so I'll keep them on the shelf. So he's organised 2 new bearings, new housing. There is diff gears, and he was talking about maybe putting an auto locker or using the limo that come in this centre. This is the limo out of it, pulled it apart, catastrophic failure. The price to fix that, you just buy another one. And then I said it's a 4-wheel drive, you're using it for 4-wheel drive things. Just spend the money, put an ARB locker in it, they're a lot stronger, and you have the added bonus of now you're going to have an onboard air compressor for pumping your tyres up and what have you. He's decided to go with the new ARB, or newish ARB twin pump design, and then run in an air tank, so he can run like a rattle gun or what have you off it. So yeah, I'll have to get this junk housing out of this diff flip jig. If you guys are chasing one of these, hit up Josh Hillfab on Facebook or Instagram. He does them as a flat packer or weld out. They're pretty cheap, make this job so much easier. You just clamp those bolts there so you can flip it around, these arms move out, put whatever housing in it. I build a lot of diffs, so it's certainly a lot more easier than this. The flippable bench vise, I've dropped a housing out of that onto my toe, and now I've got a pretty manky looking big toenail, so that's great. So I'll get the new housing set up in this diff flipper 9000. The first job we have to do is you've got to drill and tap, I believe it's over here, 1/4 inch by 18 MPT pipe tap. That's for the air line to feed obviously the air locker. Before you do anything, drill and tap that. So 1/4 inch MPT tap, 11.2mm drill, which is like, what is it, 9 something or others? I don't know imperial shit. 11.2mm drill, you can get away with 11 if you get stuck. And then, yeah, we'll start throwing it together. Right, I've had a look in the book, and unfortunately where the airline's got to go was right where that Sydney Competition sticker or tag was, so I've had to pull that off, and that's just left raw cast iron, so I'll touch the paint up. Just a little bit annoying, maybe I should have looked at it, but why would you do that when you can do it on the day? So, all my good drills and that are currently stuck in bloody Sydney on lockdown, so we're using this old girl. We'll see how we go. Ooh, she sounded pretty doughy. Jeez Louise. I might have to charge this thing. Well, wasn't that an ordeal to drill and tap, but it's got to be done. Oh, look at that. Which is a good thing. It'll screw in and thread in nice. Now I'll just brush touch a bit of that with the paint again. Unfortunately, we had to lose that pretty logo that I spent all that time masking up, so it still looked nice, but oh well. Shit happens. So I'll paint that, we'll flip it over and we'll start on the rest of her. Alright, I just punched the pinion snubber bearing into the housing there. You can see the old one was cracked off right through there. This casting's a lot thicker, that's why there's a machine mark there and there. They pretty much just leave it as thick as they possibly can just to squeeze the ring gear in there, because it is a common failure point. So now, it's time to unbox the goodies. Get into this thing. Come here, you bastard. Don't need this shit where we're going. One ARB air locker. Oof, my lantern, that's heavy. Lovely. So I've got to punch carrier bearings on either side of this. So, got to punch carrier bearings on either side of that, ring gear on, and away we go. So I think, yeah it is, it's the other side, the longer side. Come here. That's where the actual air goes in. There's a seal ring that sits over it. There's more stuff I'll show you coming up, but yeah, air goes in there and then that's what actually locks the sun gears and everything in there together. So we'll give that a go. Alright, I was about to fit the ring gear and then I read the manual a bit further and it advises that some third member housings require the snubber bearing housing to be clearanced right where it's touching the locker. And I will definitely have to clearance it because as you can see the bearing race is there on this side and there on that side, so it's all too far this way. Being that this is, it says lightly clearance, but being that this is a thicker casting, I'm probably just going to have to play it by ear and just keep going until I get it so I can actually get that diff lock further over. It looks like it's got to go at least 5 mil. But it's 8 o'clock at the moment at night on a Friday, so I don't want to go waking the neighbours up, so that's going to be a tomorrow job. Yeah, so probably catch you tomorrow if I don't get sidetracked on doing something else. Alright, so I got the housing clearanced out now that it's a new day. You can see I've been doing a bit already. I was helping my boss put a engine in his Hilux, so that's alright. So here it is here. Clearance, that's as far this way as it'll go. You can see I've got it, it's way over further than it's ever going to need to be, so that should give me clearance while it's rotating. So now it's ready for the crown wheel. You've got to clean, you've got a Loctite crown wheel bolt, so you've got to get all the oil off them. So I've got crown wheel bolts in that, that's just thinners, and then I've contact cleaned the absolute park out of those threads, but I'll give them another go because it still looks a little bit oily. Knock the crown wheel on, and then we can keep building the diff. Alright, I can't really get the bloody oil out of the threads in that, so I'm thinking might heat it up. We'll see how we go here. Ooh, fuck. Okay. Let's try that again without setting my bench on fire. right crown wheel situated, you'll notice the bolts are back out of it. I was doing it up and I just could not get the crown wheel to pull up all the way. I was able to knock it on with a dead blow, it didn't take that much. Back the bolts back out, and you can sort of see those end threads are gone. So, I've had it happen before. The back of the lock is actually thinner than obviously the hemisphere that was on there. These are the original bolts I'm using, so I'm going to have to knock about 10 mil off the head of them. So those 12 bolts I now have to cut 10 mil off. But what do? It's got to happen. That's alright. Rifle into it with a grinder. I'm sure I won't fuck this up. Going to start assembling the pinion. So I've got to press the lower pinion bearing on. Interestingly enough, the top and bottom pinion bearing are both the same. Which is interesting, to me anyway. And there's no shim underneath the bottom pinion bearing. Patrols and Hiluxes typically have a shim there, and then that's how you set your contact patch. With this, you actually shim the entire pinion housing in and out of the third member. So, just differences. So I'll go ahead and try and punch this on without killing it, which is going to be very difficult. But we'll see how we go. I'm just going to slide on. Oh, it might. Oh, baby. Oh, sweet. Oh. Okay. I'm guessing there's a swage point there. Okay, time to slip the pinion into the pinion housing. Now, I wouldn't normally do this, but what I'm going to do is throw a bit of engine assembly lube, or just assembly lube anyway. It's basically thick oil. Mainly because this diff isn't going to be used for a while. The owner is about 3 hours away from me, so it won't get into his car and covered in oil for a fair old time. So I'll just jam a bit into the bearings. It'll help out. And we'll see how we go there. Gonna make a mess everywhere, no doubt. That's okay. That is okay. Just fall off, why don't you? Okay. Now, interestingly enough, these diffs still use a crush tube, which is normally a weak point of a diff. Like a Patrol doesn't use a crush tube at all, where Hiluxes do, and Hiluxes break all the time. That's, you know, one of the big things. But this one has a crush tube, so that's okay. We'll put the crush tube in it. I measured the old crush tube that come on that gear set, and it's crushed at 0.8 of a millimetre. So I'll have to, when I'm doing the pinion nut up, I'll just have to set up the dial indicator, crush it that much, or you just measure the sink, how far the flange drops in as you do the nut up. There is a tightening torque for it as well, which I'll go to. Oh, that is sticky. You don't want to hit these bearings into the race too hard. You do what's called Brunelling the bearing. So it's the roller on the bearing. It's soft mould steel, it's case hardened, so there is a hardened skin around it. That skin's only 0.1 thick. So if you hit it hard enough into the race, you will bruise the soft mould steel underneath the skin, which will then in turn give you high spots, and that will cause the bearing to fail prematurely. So I just gently tap it down into the seat, just about that. And then we'll use the nut to drive it together properly. There was also this spacer washer underneath. That's just the yoke pulls up against that, so it's not sitting hard up against the back of the bearing. And then we've got our seal, which is going to be a bastard to get in. Come on now. maybe I'll have to do that properly. Now, one thing I do find, it's mainly on Toyotas, is the oil will walk up the spline of the yoke or up the thread of the nut. So what I find in good practice, I do it to patrol diffs as well, even though I've never had that problem, but just to be sure, I just put a little RTV on the mailing face of the nut. This has already got some form of paint compound to make it seal, but I'm not going to trust that. I just put a little bit on there just to help it, because the last thing I want is a diff oil leak because it gets everywhere. And then we'll get on to doing this nut up to tightening torque. Being that this is a crush tube diff, there's not technically a Newton meters spec. You do the nut up until it takes 15 to 20 Newton meters to rotate the yoke. So you just sort of feel that out. If I was using a crush tube eliminator, which would have been nice if I had that, then there is an actual Newton meter torque. Just wind that down and then I'll feel her out. I'm having a little bit of issue with the pinion here, doing it up, so I've got to get something with a bit more horsepower. You can sort of see that moving up and down. There's a crush tube in there, obviously. I'm having trouble crushing it, so I've got to crush it. I think it was about 0.8 of a millimetre, but I just don't have anything powerful enough to do that, so I can't build the diff until I get that crushed appropriately. Then I can put the pinion in, and then I can set contact patch and backlash. Alright, time to make a solid pinion spacer for that little 9-inch. This is a bit of hardened sleeve left over from the adapter I made for that little 3K and the Hilux case. So I'll have to bore it out a little bit, and what is I've got to make it 11.4 mil long. That's the crush tube out of that diff originally. I put it back in it and tensioned it to the correct sort of preload, and it was a little bit tight, so I'm going to go 0.1 up, which is 11.4. We're good to go. I pulled the one out and measured it. I've been able to crush that 0.3 of a millimetre. And it is, like, it's so tight I'm going to strip that pinion nut. So this is why I'm going to the solid pinion spacer. It's got to be stronger in the long run. The bloke's pretty hard on the gear. That's how he broke it last time. So we'll just do it and do it right this time. You can buy a solid pinion spacer for 9-inch. Everywhere in Australia is sold out. So they're all coming from the States. They're saying a minimum of 4 weeks and up to ship it to your door, and it's pretty much exactly what I'm going to fucking make anyway. So I'll just machine this one up. I won't have to run any shims. I'll just machine it literally as a solid pinion spacer. Normally you've got like a really thick washer, and then you put a bunch of 0.1 shims under it to get your correct sort of bearing preload. I'm just going to make this the right fucking size, so I don't have to shim bug all. So I'll rifle into that. We'll have a go. There we go. One 9-inch solid pinion spacer. So that goes obviously here where the crush washer was. Yep. Drop the housing over the top. Wipe some of that dirt off. Yep. We'll slip the yoke on, knock it together, torque up the nut, and then I'll throw my fish scale on it. It's kilograms of force for revolution. For bearing preload. Oh no, that was with a crush tube. I think there is actually a fucking Newton meter for solid pinion spacer 9-inch. I'll have to have a look. It's been a long day. So I'll have a go with that. We'll hit you in a sec. Alright, putting the hemisphere in. Cranwell bolts are in, torqued up. That's alright. And now you got the caps are threaded, bolted together, so you've got to keep your caps in the right spot. So that's why these are punched. These come pre-punched. And there's a corresponding, you can't really see, there it is, down there. So the dot goes to the dot, and as you can see, I got these ones backwards, so I'll flip them around. But anyway, what I was coming to say is, now as you're going to tighten these caps down, you want to screw this in to line the threads up. Okay, but with the AOB locker, the seal ring slides or sits on here, so you can't use the locking ring you had. They supply you one. In this case, they supply you two, depending on your housing. You got a big and a little. So the one I need is the big one. Screw that in, and it comes with this little air seal retaining ring that snaps into the back of the locking ring, and then it locks in over the back of the teeth there. So that's the same with all air lockers. You've got to run that on the air seal side, but they normally only come with one, I guess. Well, it is a 9-inch, so who knows which 9-inch you have. So I'll flip them caps around, I'll wind that in, and we'll get some rough load put on that for now, and then I'll probably call it a night for tonight and hit it a wee bit later. I'm having a... Okay, I've angled the gear set so you can see it a little bit better. This here, if you can read it, is bearing blue. Think of it like a dye marking sort of grease. Use it for a lot of things, for checking contact patch obviously, but also like if you need something super flat, you can use it to lap. Now you got to try and put it on pretty thin so you can actually see what it's doing. I'd normally use a brush, but I can't fucking find my brush. So I'll just put a few dabs on the gear. You don't need to do a handful of teeth, and then just smear it. You want to get both sides, the drive and the overdrive side of the tooth. Then you'll roll it by the pinion flange and load the gear up a little bit, and that'll actually show you what it's doing. You want to see a rub mark pretty much right in the middle of the gear tooth on both sides. This being a second-hand gear set, it probably won't be exactly right on both sides, just because of wear, and probably it would have been set up incorrectly in the first place. So I'll aim for the best contact patch on the drive side of the gear, and if it's a little bit high or out on the overdrive side, we'll just leave it. This fucking blue shit gets everywhere. I remember when I was doing my trade, my apprenticeship, there's part of the course is you had to use this to, they call it lapping and scraping. You got to literally scrape a flat block, 100% flat. You use this on a provenly flat surface, and then rub your block over it, and it'll, all the shiny spots are the high spots, so you've got to scrape them off. A lot of people used to cheat it because it is a shit job. While the teacher was there, you'd rub your block on the plate, and then when he turned his back, you'd go and get the bearing blue and then rub it all over it again, so it made it look like there was no high spots. But no point in cheating it if we don't want to learn how to do it properly. What do we got here? It's a bit hard to see. Yeah. Drive side looks like it's right in the middle of the gear tooth. I'll do a couple more revs. As you can see, the overdrive side, the back side of the buttress of the tooth hasn't been touched, which it won't in standard driving conditions. Only coasting downhill and reverse, obviously. It's a bit hard to see. Yeah, it's pretty much in the middle of the gear tooth. So now we'll spin it backwards. I'll check the overdrive side. As I said, if the overdrive side's a little bit out, you'll probably be able to see the overdrive side more than me. See how it's closer to the toe there? You want that rub mark more in the middle of the gear tooth. Let's do this a few times. So what I could do there is I could pull that shim out underneath this pinion housing, but the drive side looks good, so I'm hesitant to do that because it's sort of a balance. So if I move the overdrive side further in the centre, it's going to move the drive side closer to the outer of the gear. It being pretty much bang on the centre, I'll be more inclined to leave it than anything. But I suppose it's only 5 bolts, I can just pop that out, see what it wants to do. I know, I'll have a think about it. Alright, I'll see if I can show you this without blinding the bloody camera with the light. See the overdrive side of the tooth there, see how it's shiny right on the root of the tooth, right there? Means the pinion's plunged in too far. But if you look on the back side of it, see how it's, that one especially, the shiny spot's pretty much right in the middle of the gear set, or the tooth. That's pretty much what I want. So, I'll pop that shim out, because I can, it's super easy. I'll give it another run. If it gets worse on the drive side, we're going to run it like that. I'm not too fussed about overdrive side being out, because, as I said, it's reversing coasting down hills. It's, in theory, it shouldn't have any load on it. The mate will probably get drunk again and try and do something dumb in reverse and explode it. If he does, it's on him, because it is a second-hand gear set. Unfortunately, it was probably incorrectly installed in the first place, which has worn the gear set wrong. You have a brand new set of gears, especially in patrols. Actually, I've never had an issue with contact patch in patrol gear sets, especially with genuine Nissan. I pretty much just put them together, contact patch lines up, bang in the money. So if it's a new set of gears, they're machined to match. You can't mismatch pinion and crown wheel, because they will explode. Because they're machined to match, as long as you get your pinion plunge into the housing right, your contact patch is going to be bang on the money. So because this is a second-hand gear set, I could already see there was some substantial wear on the high side of the tooth when he gave me the gear set, and I did say these are second-hand gears. You could have probably bought new ones. They're only 3.9s or something, but he was happy to run these, so I'll run them. If anything happens, the housing and the lock is bulletproof now, so we can always just throw another set of gears at it at a later date. So I'll pull that shim out and we'll have a look at it. If it's shit, this next part will be me doing the air locker line. Alright, seal housing time. It'll come wrapped like that, copper line. They always put it in this funny wax paper shit. There it is there. So it just goes over the top here, like that. Little cutout for the locking ring for the main cap adjusters. It obviously needs seals putting in it, so there you are. They call them an X seal. They used to be a square section seal, but it's got like two, it's hard to tell, two raised lips on the outside edges of them. You pop them into the housing, hit it with a bit of diff oil, then there's a locking ring. So it goes into there's a groove machined around here. There we go, that might be a bit better to see. Groove machined around here, so it pops around the groove and into these two holes. And the hooks, there we go, hook on the teeth of the main cap adjuster. So I'll pop these X seals in. These are supposed to be better. These used to get a pretty bad rap for being air leakers. So this is one of their fixes. Go to an X seal. It used to just literally be a square section O-ring. There's a 2 groove in there. They're a bit of a bastard to put in, but we'll see how we go. See if I can actually do this on camera. There we go, one in, and I'll have to go and get some diff oil, which I did not get. Back in the day, it used to be ARB specified 85-140 weight diff oil to help help the seals, and also it's thicker, so it'll stop seeping through the seals and stop the air coming out as well. So that'll go on there, nice and gentle. I'll go and get some diff oil. Forgot. Maybe 140 here somewhere. There we go. They never used to really specify whether it had to be LSD rated or not. LSD rated just has a bit of extra friction modifier in it. nothing too major. I think nowadays with the new X seal setup, and there's been a few different changes internally with the return springs, I think you can just run standard 90 weight. I'd have to read the book a bit more. It has been a little while since I built one, but it's like riding a bike. All diff locks are the same, or ARB diff locks are the same anyway. They just fit in different housings. Interestingly enough, the owner of this actually had to wait a fair while. So all ARB lockers are made in Australia. They're actually made in Melbourne. But being that there's not a big demand for 9-inch in Australia, they all get made and then sent straight over to the States. So he ordered it and then had to wait like 2 or 3 months to actually have one machined for him, because the ones that had been machined were already spoken for. So he was fairly pissed off. Line that up. Now sometimes I didn't have to on this one, but I've had it before. See how that'll spin relatively easily. Now you don't want to flex it too hard because you'll break that fucking pipe off. That is a $60 part, so if you break it, they do replacements. It ain't cheap. 60 or 110 actually. It's been a while. I haven't broken one in fucking forever. All right, we'll put our locking ring on now. And you want to put the hooks in first, if I can. And then there's a little relief down the bottom here. Just use a screwdriver. And then you just pop it over. Bingo. And we are locked. Still relatively easy-ish to move. But it does advise in the book that locking tab, some cases, not so much in this 9-inch one. I've mainly had to do it Hilux ones actually. You've got to cut that tab down and refold it so there's more clearance to the ring. That one I just give it a light tap with a punch. Just curled it in a little bit and we are good to go. So now comes the really fun part. You got to chase that up and over the gear set without touching the gear set or getting crushed by anything here and out the hole. So I'll scratch my head a little bit, get that. They've usually got a diagram of how you got to route it. Where are we? There we go. See that? Yeah. So air seal up over the crown wheel, pretty close to the main cap bolts, and then out the hole. And you can see there it's advising you that you've got to shorten these down. I didn't have to do it on this one. I've never really had to do it with patrols either. It's mainly been Hilux ones I've had to shorten. Call that what you want. Alright, that's a copper line run. You want a bit of clearance around everything. I pretty much copied the diagram as best I could. Just, you know, I've given it 10mm clearance everywhere, and then when it comes down through the hole, you want it naturally to sit basically in the middle of the hole. You don't want it pulling too much on the seal housing because then it can kick the seal housing and then they will naturally leak air. So now that's like that. We move on to the next step, which is screw the fittings in. It's actually a new style fitting. It used to be like a copper olive compression fitting. This is actually, it's still a compression fitting, but it's an O-ring based compression fitting, which is pretty cool. Because it used to be with the compression fitting, once it was fitted, that's it. You'd never get that seal housing back out. You had to like leave it in the housing and try and bend it, and I've seen a lot of failures because by the time it's out, you do a gear set, you put it in, you're gonna knock it and you'll shear that off at the braze. I've seen people attempt to braze it back on successfully and unsuccessfully, and then of course if it's unsuccessfully you don't realise until you put it in the car. So I'll have a go at fitting this little compression fitting. I've got to cut the pipe as well. I've got a little pipe cutter around here somewhere. And that will be this diff centre done. It'll go off to the owner when coronavirus lets me drive it out there, because he's like 3 hours away from me. This is also using the new style swivel bulkhead. It used to just come out. I've actually, I was going to say I got an old style sitting in a box there. It just comes straight out of that fitting, And if it was a loose centre and it rolled over, it'd shear that fucking plastic line off every time. The only little sort of support it had was like a wound spring that run up the line coming out of the housing. Without a doubt, you pull the diff centre out if you busted an axle or something, you put it on the ground, turn around, it's rolled over, it's sheared that airline off, 100%. So this is a much better way of doing it. See, poly line goes in, compression fitting on it. I'm going to leave that out because he's going to have to route his own lines. Comes with all the zip ties and everything in the kit. So, there we go. I'll just tweak that copper line just a smidgen more because it's in the centre at the top but not at the bottom. And I'll show you when it's done. And then she's ready to throw in a box and get the fuck out of my shed. There we have it. 1:3:9 ratioed, strange housings, airlocked, 9-inch diff centre. So, get up there, you bastard. And see sort of the profile I've gone, which is pretty much exactly how they had it in the drawing. Get around, you bastard. Got the bulkhead fitting in there. It's got a, you actually wind that centrepiece down with a flathead screwdriver. You can press the 2 O-rings and brass spacer. Tells you how to do it all in the book. But that's it. She's done. So I might look at sticking that in a box. I'll probably leave it in the fucking diff flipper for now until it comes time to get rid of it because I really don't want to damage that copper seal housing line. So we'll leave it there for now. And then when my mate needs it, I'll look at trying to stick it in a bucket or something. I could probably go to the workshop and cut up like a bloody steel cradle and fold it up that bolts to there and comes down and protects everything. It's a lot of motivation that I probably won't have. So it'll get a bucket or a postie box and we'll go from there. But that's it for this set. She's done. So I'll catch you on the next one. God knows what I'll be working on then. The weather's starting to half come good, so I might be able to actually paint Sarge. It's been raining for fucking ever. I sat that 3K and that in the F10. I've got to do a bit of mucking around there. The factory 3K exhaust manifold's pointing pretty much directly at the chassis member. I don't know what they've done previously when they've put them in those cars. I might look at, I'll probably have to put extractors on it really. If not, if I need super clearance, I'll just build a log manifold. Do a turbo then? No, God no, don't fucking turbo, what are you talking? So if I've got to build a log manifold, I will. If not, extractors are cheap for those little 3Ks. They're anywhere from 200 to 400 bucks. 400 bucks next you like proper 304 bloody equal length fucking extractors, and in that little F10 you ain't gonna need that much. So it'll probably get the $200 Chinesium stainless bloody extractors on it, and I might have to just cut it and shrink her in closer to the head. We'll see. But the transfer case stick is in the same plane as the hole in the floor, just pointing to the passenger side, not the driver's. I'll just put a wiggle in the stick. And the engine mounts are lining up exactly where the F10's original engine mounts are, so I'll just build a horn coming off the block, going to the original F10 engine mounts. It's working out mostly exactly how I thought, and I should be able to just run a 12mm plate gearbox cross member, flat belly. So the picture I had in my head is working out. That might be next episode, we'll see. I've been tinkering around with it for a little while there. But we'll shut it down here. You guys keep the rubber side down and I'll catch you on the next one. Right.